Hi guys, and thanks for clicking on the video. So in this particular video, we're going to take a look at Elementary OS. So this is 5.0, this is the Juno edition, and this is the 64-bit version. And as you can see on my screen, obviously this is running in VirtualBox, and it's built on top of Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. So the Elementary team generally tracks the LTS releases of Ubuntu, usually whenever they release new versions of the OS. So Elementary is a very different distribution. So why do I say that? So I'm not necessarily sure Elementary is my particular brand of whiskey, but I think that what they're doing is important work, and I really like some of the things that they're doing. So, for example, in here, this is probably a really good distribution for somebody who doesn't want to tweak and fiddle too much with their desktop and generally wants things to be pretty stable and generally do what they want. So they don't want to necessarily muck around with a lot of things. They don't necessarily want to have tons of options necessarily. And that can be a good thing, right? If you want to get down to business and not have to muck with your desktop and just have things work the way that you expect them, this could be a really, really good distribution for you. This also could be an excellent distribution for beginners to Linux because Elementary and their team do a really good job of trying to make it really difficult for you to hurt yourself using Linux, which that can't be said for all distributions, right? So that said, this could be a really good distribution for something like that. So if this is your first distribution or maybe two, whatever, this is a really potentially good starting point for you if maybe you took a look at Ubuntu and that just didn't strike your fancy, or maybe you felt like that was a bit too complicated or confusing. This could be a really good spot for you to land. Another really good cross-section of people who would really enjoy Elementary, I think, would be folks coming over from the Mac OS ecosystem. So, just looking at the interface, not seeing anything else, this probably feels extremely reminiscent of a Mac product, right? So, again, the Elementary team is being very smart and very intelligent about how they're keeping their interface really clean and very consistent as much as possible. So, again, that's very Apple in their interface and design language, right? So, and again, they do that very much on purpose. So, I think that's fantastic, personally. So, let's take a look at a few things. So, one of the first things you're going to notice on the particular window that I have up, you'll notice there's no minimize button. That could throw some people off. It threw me off. I've been using Linux for a really long time. So the thought process behind that, from what I've been reading lately and looking at things, is that generally you either want to close a window or application or you want to have it up and be working on it, right? So generally it's kind of a very binary on-off thing. Now you can still minimize this, so I don't want to misrepresent that. There are ways to minimize applications. So for example, if I go down here, click on System Settings, Magic, right? Minimize. Boom, there we go, minimize again. Now something that is really cool, if you hit the super key on your keyboard, it'll actually bring up these keyboard shortcuts, so that's actually really handy. However, in a lot of distributions, when I hit the meta key, or the super key, I'm thinking I want a menu to open, or I want to see an application list depending on the shortcut that I'm hitting, and things like that. So this isn't a bad thing. This is just something that's different. And it's just worth pointing out so that if you would be using this as a first-time Linux distribution and things like that, understand that this is not necessarily the norm, but it's a different way of thinking, and I really enjoy distributions that make me think in a different way. Elementary is one of those. So, again, really handy. So here's a bunch of keyboard shortcuts that show you how to do a bunch of things and move around the interface. Kudos to them for putting this here, because I am a big fan of keyboard-driven types of distributions and things of the like. So even though I'm not personally super familiar with these keyboard shortcuts, some of them I am, it's really handy that they make it really simple for you to get access to very quickly. So for example, I'm used to hitting the super key here to pull up a menu. Well, actually here, if I hit super key again, in fact, it's actually super key and spacebar. Now I get my applications menu open, right? So, okay, now it's starting to feel like other distributions. It's just a slightly different way of thinking. So, another thing that Elementary OS is really big on is native applications. They are really big on having Linux native applications in their desktop and application ecosystem. So that could be a good thing for you. That could be a crummy thing for you. It could be a good thing if you love really consistent, really beautiful looking native apps, but there might be some applications that you might not get out of the box that you want. Now, that being said, you can now add other PPAs and repositories and things like that to Elementary OS. I'm not saying that you have to do that. I'm just saying that is now an option, and the team has made it a lot easier for you to be able to do. So if you don't see something in the App Center, which I'll show you in a second, don't necessarily despair, but understand that the idea here is for you to look and see if there's something native first, and then kind of venture out into the woods, so to speak. So if we open up the App Center here, I really like the App Center, by the way. The design is beautiful. It's very consistent, again, with the rest of the desktop, things of the like. So, for instance, if we go into audio, this brings me to another interesting point about Elementary. So, they're also trying to drive a application ecosystem where developers can actually make money and actually put food on their table while they're maintaining and building these really neat applications. So, don't find the App Center. So, if we go back in there, you'll notice some of these things have, again, price tags here and things like that. Okay, so don't freak out. That doesn't mean that you have to buy every application. You can simply make that 0 and still purchase it. And if memory serves me, I believe that every time there's an update for applications like that, you'll actually just get kind of like a general reminder like, hey, do you want to, buy this application, this, that, or the other thing? It's just a nice general way to say, if you're using this application and you really, really like it and you want to support the folks who are building it, then here's a way to, throw a couple bucks their way, right? So even though App Center's fighting me a little bit here. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to chalk that up to VirtualBox being a jerk, not to Elementary, to be fair. But anyways, again, and they even have lists of like curated apps. So I mean, obviously these are the ones that, you can buy and, they're quote unquote curated by the Elementary team versus non-curated apps, right? So again, very interesting approach. I like it. I'm a huge fan of developers, being encouraged to make cool applications and actually get paid for it. I think that's really nice. It's not the easiest thing to be able to do, and I know there are a lot of other distributions have tried doing similar things, and it didn't really go that well. So I'm very interested to see if the Elementary team is able to succeed where other distributions have failed. So that could be really, really cool. So if we go and we look up here, and again, fairly standard stuff up here, like notifications, batteries, networking stuff. They have a nice little built-in music player here with some built-in controls, which is really nice. So the desktop environment for Elementary is called Pantheon, and Pantheon technically could be used on other distributions, but obviously it's an Elementary first type of desktop environment. So Pantheon is lighter than, say, like GNOME 3, though it is a GTK-based desktop, if I'm not mistaken. And in looking at FreeMem and a few other things in Terminal just before I started recording this video, having done nothing, I was sitting right around 624 megs of RAM used and things like that. That's actually pretty light. In the grand scheme of things, with, again, default configuration. I didn't muck with anything. That's just out of the box. That's not bad. That's actually pretty good. So, again, this isn't necessarily my cup of tea. I'm a bit more of a tinkerer, customizer, and fiddler and stuff like that. But just to be absolutely clear, I think this could be an excellent distribution for somebody getting started in Linux, especially if they don't want something that is so overwhelming that they're put off. I think this is an excellent gateway or bridge to start one's Linux journey and potentially branch out into other distributions. Or maybe they'll just stay here and hang out because, they enjoy the fairly minimal interface and the let's just get stuff done and the overall stability. So, in any event, this has been a really quick unreview of Elementary OS. This is certainly not top to bottom, top down, or comparing it to anything else crazy, but again, kind of going along with the series here. So we started with what are some tools that you can use to try and pick out distributions that you might want to start with. And I'm starting to go through kind of down the line of some that might be good for beginners, some for beginner or intermediate, things of the like, just to give you a very quick flavor and give you a relatively brief sense of is this something that you might want to dive into, or is this something you might want to put on that checklist for something in the near future down the line? All right, well, thanks so much, and hopefully this was really helpful for you guys. And I've been Shikmo. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.